Good morning, everyone, and you are very welcome to today's webinar. For those of you who have just logged on, we have already completed a sound test, and thanks to everyone who helped out with that. So first of all, I want to introduce ourselves. My name is Rachel Hines, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at BrightPay. And also joined by me today is Karen Bennett, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at BrightPay. First up on the agenda for today, we are going to look at the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, in particular, how the rules are going to change between now and September, and what it means for your business. We're also going to show you how BrightPay caters for the furlough scheme with our furlough pay calculator and CJRS claim report. Next is Key Lessons Learned, where we will look at some of the key lessons that payroll processors have learned over the past year. And finally, we will look at practical guidance on how BrightPay can help your business survive the pandemic. Finally, at the end of the webinar, we will have a questions and answers section where we will answer any questions that you may have. For the questions and answers session, we will be joined by Paul Byrne, who is the Managing Director here at BrightPay, Laura Murphy, who is our Chief HR Officer, and Victoria Clark, who is the Product Development and Training Manager here at BrightPay. If you do have any questions, you can type them into the questions box on your control panel at the side of the screen, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible. This webinar is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an email later today with a link to the recording of the webinar, so it's no problem if you do need to leave at any stage. Also in the email later today, there will be a copy of the presentation slides that we are using today, or you can also download the slides right now if you wish on the Handouts tab on your control panel. We will also include some useful documents and additional resources that you may find helpful in the email later today. So now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, I'm going to get started with today's webinar. As we get closer to the end of lockdown, many businesses are looking forward to returning to the workplace and experiencing some form of normality. Unfortunately, depending on the industry that your business is in, many may not bounce back as quickly as other sectors. While some businesses will be preparing for the safe return to the workplace and implementing vaccine policies, others will unfortunately be facing into a difficult few months, and many businesses will need to avail of the furlough scheme until its very end in September. The Chancellor announced the extension of the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme to September 2021 as part of the budget in March. And with this extension, there have been a number of changes to the scheme, including a reduction in the levels of subsidy support from the government that will happen from July 2021 onwards. However, there are some other more imminent changes which are happening from May 2021, including new eligibility rules and changes to the reference period used for these newly eligible employees. Until these changes take effect, the existing scheme rules remain in place with no major changes taking effect since November. During today's webinar, we are going to look at the existing scheme rules that have been in place since November and until the end of April, and then we'll also look at how the rules will change between May and September. So I'm now going to pass you over to Karen to talk you through these changes in more detail.
Thanks, Rachel, and good morning, everyone. Under the existing scheme rules, employers can claim grants covering 80% of wages up to a cap of £2,500 for the hours an employee is not working. Where the employee is not working, the employer does not have to contribute towards wages for unworked hours, but they are responsible for paying employer NIC and pension contributions. Where an employee is on flexible furlough, or also known as partial furlough, employers have to pay full pay for any hours worked. These levels of subsidy support will continue until the 30th of June 2021, but the government subsidy will change from the 1st of July 2021 as the scheme begins to wind down. For the month of July, the government will contribute 70% of wages, up to a maximum of £2,187.50 per month for unworked hours. The employer will also have to contribute 10% of wages, so that employee receives 80% of their usual wages for any hours not worked, up to a cap of £2,500. For August and September, the government subsidy will drop to 60%, up to a cap of £1,875 per month, with the employer having to top up the additional 20% so that the employee receives 80% of their wages, again up to a cap of £2,500. Employers must continue to pay the employer NIC and pension contributions on the government subsidy for the hours not worked. Employers can also continue to choose to top up their employees' wages above the 80% total and £2,500 cap for the hours not worked at their own expense. So now that we know the level of subsidy support, it's important to know which employees you can claim for. And the rules in relation to employee eligibility have also changed. Unlike the second phase of the furlough scheme, you do not need to have previously claimed for an employee before the 30th of October 2020 to claim periods from the 1st of November 2020 onwards. For periods ending on or before the 30th of April 2021, you can claim for employees who were employed on the 30th of October 2020, as long as you have made an RTI submission to HMRC between the 20th of March 2020 and the 30th of October 2020, notifying HMRC of a payment made to that employee. Employees made redundant or who stopped working for you after the 23rd of September 2020 can be rehired and placed on furlough under the scheme until the 30th of April 2021. This is allowed as long as the employee was employed as of the 23rd of September 2020 and included in an RTI submission between the 20th of March and the 30th of October 2020. So what's changing over the coming weeks? For periods starting on or after the 1st of May 2021, you can claim for employees who were employed on the 2nd of March 2021, as long as they were notified to HMRC on an RTI submission between the 20th of March 2020 and the 2nd of March 2021. You do not need to have previously claimed for an employee before the 2nd of March 2021 to claim for periods starting on or after the 1st of May 2021. And so this means employees who started working for you on or before the 3rd of March will now be eligible for the scheme for claims starting on or after the 1st of March. To be eligible for the grant, employers must have confirmed to their employee in writing that they have been furloughed, and you must keep a written record of the agreement for 6 years. Employers will decide the hours and shift patterns their employees will work, and so employees can work as much or as little as the business needs. And again, you need to keep records of how many hours your employees work and the number of hours they are furloughed for. For employees who are moving from full-time furlough to flexible furlough, or vice versa, you will also need to agree on this with the employee and keep a new written agreement that confirms the new furlough arrangement. If an employee is already on a flexible furlough agreement, this can be varied to reflect any variation in the working pattern agreed between the parties. The employer does not need a new furlough agreement each time the worker's hours change, and can instead issue an amendment if there is a change in the working pattern. So back over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Karen. So next is calculating a CJRS claim and determining what you can claim for. And BrightPay provides functionality to calculate and apply furlough pay to an employee's payslip, which we will look at later. If you're in a position where employees are fully furloughed, you do not need to work out the employee's usual hours and their furloughed hours. However, if an employee is flexibly furloughed, you will be required to work out the employee's usual hours, their actual hours worked, and their furloughed hours for each claim period. And the reason for this is because any hours worked will reduce the government subsidy available on a pro-rata basis. By entering in the employee's usual hours worked and the actual hours worked into BrightPay, the software will automatically calculate the prorated subsidy. There are different calculations to consider when calculating your employee's usual hours, depending on whether they work fixed or variable hours. You also need to factor in the relevant reference period, and this depends on whether the employee was eligible for the scheme. So first we will look at employees who work a fixed number of hours. For employees on fixed hours who are eligible for furlough under the original scheme, the usual hours calculation is based on their normal contractual hours at the end of the last pay period, ending on or before the 19th of March 2020, and this is regardless of whether or not they were actually placed on furlough during the initial few months of the scheme. A different pay reference period exists for all other workers, that is, those who were not eligible for furlough under the original scheme. So, for example, new joiners after the previous cut-off date of the 19th of March 2020. For these employees, the calculation is based on the wages payable in the last pay period ending on or before the 30th of October 2020, and the employee must have been included in an RTI submission to HMRC between the 20th of March 2020 and the 30th of October 2020. Where neither the 19th of March 2020 nor the 30th of October 2020 reference dates apply, the employee is not eligible for periods starting before the 1st of May 2021. However, if you made a payment of earnings to an employee which was reported to HMRC on an RTI submission between the 31st of October 2020 and the 2nd of March 2021, they may be eligible for periods starting on or after the 1st of May 2021, and their reference date will be the 2nd of March 2021. It's also worth noting that if an employee with fixed hours was on annual leave, off work sick, or on family-related statutory leave at any time during the last reference period, the usual hours should be calculated as if the employee had not taken that leave. For employees whose pay varies depending on the number of hours worked, again, the usual hours calculation depends on whether or not they were eligible under the original scheme. For those who are eligible for furlough under the original scheme, again, regardless of whether or not they were actually placed on furlough. Their usual hours will be the higher of the average number of hours worked in the 1920 tax year, or the number of hours worked in the corresponding calendar period in the year before the furlough claim period, or the look-back period. As we have passed the 1-year anniversary of the furlough scheme, for claim periods starting from March 2021 onwards, the corresponding calendar period in 2019 should be used as opposed to 2020 when calculating the usual wages for employees on variable pay, and this is known as the look-back period. And this is to prevent the issue where an employee may have been furloughed in the same month last year, and so would only have received 80% of their pay. So for example, for April 2021, you should use the hours worked in April 2019 so that those employees who were furloughed in April 2020 wouldn't be at a disadvantage. If your employee did not work for you in the look-back period for the month you're claiming for, you can only use the averaging method to calculate 80% of their wages. For other employees, that is those who were not eligible under the original scheme, you'll need to calculate the usual hours based on the average number of hours worked in the 2021 tax year up to the day before the employee's first day spent on furlough, and that being on or after either the 1st of November 2020 for those with a reference date of the 30th of October 2020, or the 1st of May 2021 for those with a reference date of the 2nd of March 2021. And I'll pass you back to Karen again.
Thanks, Rachel. So next, we're moving on to making a CJRS claim. And employers need to make a claim through HMRC's online claim portal to avail of the scheme. Just to note, BrightPay includes a CJRS claim report, which can be used to ascertain the amounts needed for input into HMRC's online service, and we'll come back to BrightPay's CJRS claim report later in the webinar. The minimum claim period is 1 week, and claim periods must start and end within the same calendar month. Therefore, pay periods that span 2 calendar months must be broken down into 2 separate claims. It will only be possible to claim for a period of less than a week if the period claimed for includes the first or the last day of the month, and a claim has already been made for the period ending immediately before it. Employers can make claims before, during, or after the payroll is run. Claims can be made up to 14 days before the end of the claim period. It's also important to note that the earliest claims can be made for May 2021 will be the 19th of April 2021. This will be the point at which the eligibility criteria is widened so that any employees on payroll submissions on or before the 2nd of March 2021 can be placed on furlough and claimed for under the CJRS. Employers can only make 1 claim per claim period, so you must include all furloughed and flexibly furloughed employees in the 1 claim, even if you pay them at different times. When claiming for employees on flexible furlough, employers will need to report hours worked along with the worker's usual hours in a claim period. Therefore, it is best to make a claim once you're sure of the exact number of hours your employees will work, so you don't have to amend your claim at a later date. There are now shorter deadlines for submitting monthly claims. Claims for periods starting on or after the 1st of November must be submitted within 14 calendar days after the month they relate to, unless this falls on a weekend, in which case the deadline is the next weekday. The deadline for claims relating to March 2021 has already passed, and so the next deadline is the 14th of May 2021 for claims relating to April 2021. HMRC may also accept late claims if you have a reasonable excuse, provided that you have taken reasonable care to try and claim on time and claimed without delay as soon as you are able to. HMRC have set out a list of various reasons that they consider to be reasonable excuses, and you can see them here on the screen. You must contact HMRC to ask to submit a late claim. You should do this as soon as you are ready to make your claim, and HMRC should only be contacted once the claim deadline has passed. If you have claimed too much CJRS grant and have not already repaid it, you can repay it as part of your next online claim without needing to contact HMRC. If you claimed too much but do not plan to submit further claims, you can let HMRC know and make a repayment online. You must notify HMRC and repay the money by the later of either 90 days from receiving the CJRS money you're not entitled to, or 90 days from the point of circumstances changing so that you are no longer entitled to keep the CJRS grant. If you do not do this, you may have to pay interest plus a penalty, as well as repaying the excess CJRS grant. If you made a mistake in your claim that means you received too little money, you'll need to amend it within 28 calendar days after the month the claim relates to, unless this falls on a weekend or a bank holiday, in which case the deadline is the next weekday. The deadline to amend claims for March is Wednesday, the 28th of April. If you haven't submitted your claim for March by the 28th of April, but believe you have a reasonable excuse for missing the deadline, you must contact HMRC to ask to submit a late claim. Back over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Karen. So next is employer compliance. And as part of HMRC's commitment to transparency and to deter fraudulent claims, details of CJRS claims are now being published monthly. The first publication in January related to the names of employers who made a CJRS claim in December 2020. The employer names used for the publication is the name associated with the qualifying PAYE scheme, and so it may not be the same as the company's trading name. In February, HMRC went one step further and are now publishing additional information, including an indication of the value of the claim within a banded range and the company number for companies and limited liability partnerships. The publication does not include employers who have made an application to have their details withheld or those who have paid back the whole grant prior to the publication of the list. The March 2021 publication is data for claim periods for December 2020 and January 2021, and the banded amount is the total amount claimed for each month for December and January. February 2021 claim information will be available on the 6th of May 2021, and the December 2020 and January 2021 claim information will be refreshed to take into account any amendments or repayments made. Since last February, employees also have access to information relating to furlough claims. Employees can check their online personal tax account to check if they were included in a grant for December 2020 or January 2021. employees are being encouraged to report fraud to HMRC where they have evidence that suggests that their employer is abusing the scheme. HMRC's assumption is that between 5% and 10% of all claims related to the furlough scheme are fraudulent. It's estimated that since the start of the furlough scheme in March 2020, a massive £3.5 billion paid to employers could be fraudulent or have been made in error. And given the significant investment by the government and the sheer scale of the suspected fraud, it is expected that HMRC will be relentless in pursuing those who have taken unfair advantage of the scheme. And HMRC is now aiming to collect double the amount wrongly claimed. However, HMRC do appreciate that mistakes happen and is not aiming to target innocent errors. Next, we're moving on to some hot topics in relation to the furlough scheme. And first is the national minimum wage and national living wage for furloughed employees. This is very topical at the moment as new minimum wage rates came into effect on the 1st of April 2021. Employees are only entitled to the national living wage or the national minimum wage for the hours that they are working. Therefore, where furloughed staff are paid 80% of their wages, this means that they get less than the minimum wage. However, employers are required to pay employees their normal wages for any hours worked during furlough. And this also includes time spent doing work-related training. This means that employees are entitled to the appropriate minimum wage rate for the hours that they are working or doing work-related training under the minimum wage rules. Where the pay is less than the appropriate minimum wage entitlement, the employer will need to pay additional amounts to ensure at least the appropriate minimum wage is paid for both working time and 100% of training time while on furlough. The second hot topic is bank holidays and annual leave. With Easter a few weeks ago and the May bank holidays fast approaching, it is important to be aware of how public holidays impact furloughed employees. For bank holidays that fall during furlough, the employer would either have to top up the employee's pay to their normal full pay or give the employee a day of holiday in lieu. For employees on flexible furlough, holidays can be taken during working or non-working hours. However, it's important to note that holiday hours count as furloughed hours rather than working hours. Furloughed employees continue to accrue holiday and can take holidays while on furlough. However, such leave would need to be paid at the employee's normal full pay as it was prior to furlough. It is up to the employer whether to allow employees to take holiday during furlough or not. Finally is what will happen when the scheme ends. The government had originally said that the new job support scheme would go live when the CJRS ends. However, given the extension of the furlough scheme until the 30th of September 2021, the job support scheme is unlikely to come into force. The government had also announced a job retention bonus. However, the bonus has also been shelved given the extension of the job retention scheme. It's unlikely that any further government subsidy or job retention incentive will be in place when the job retention scheme ends. So next we're moving on to part 2 of today's webinar, and I'm going to pass you over to Vicky to show you how BrightPay caters for the CJRS. Just bear with me now.
Thanks, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay there. So as Rachel and Karen have mentioned during the webinar there, BrightPay is able to assist in two areas with the coronavirus job retention scheme. So firstly, in our software, if you have furloughed employees, we have built in a furlough pay calculator to help you calculate and apply furlough pay to an employee's payslip. So you're looking at my month one here of my 21-22 tax year, and I have furloughed employees that I wish to process. So I'm going to just access the payslip of my first furloughed employee. So my first employee, Ronan Burton here, he's been fully furloughed, so I want to add his furlough pay onto his payslip. So under additions and deductions, I'm going to click on add, followed by coronavirus job retention scheme, click here. And this takes me through to our furlough pay calculator. You just need to read the information here and check eligibility. And if you meet all the criteria, you can click on yes, I am eligible. And you're through to the calculator itself. So Ronan is being fully furloughed. So what I need to do for him is first of all enter his regular monthly wage. So I've used HMRC's guidance and using what is referenced able to be to ascertain this information. And I'm simply just going to type this in here. So I'm going to say that his regular monthly wage would be £1,000. He's fully furloughed, so that's all I need to do here. So BrightPay has calculated that the claimable furlough pay is now £800 for him. I then need to just tell the software what I want to do with regarding to topping up the furlough pay. So do I wish to top it up to meet what his regular wage would be? Do I not want to top up, or do I want to top up by a custom amount? So you choose the relevant option here. I'll say that I'm going to meet his regular wage and click on apply. I just get then confirmation of the amounts that are going to be added onto his payslip, and if happy to proceed, I say yes to continue. And you'll see now his payslip is updated with the furlough pay and the top-up amount. Moving on to my next employee, he is an example of somebody who I am flexibly furloughing. So the process is exactly the same. Click on add into the calculator. We'll say he's eligible. And I repeat really the same process here, but I do have to add a little bit more information in. So again, I'll say that his regular monthly wage that I've ascertained is £1,000. However, because he's flexibly furloughed, I need to add in a little bit more information. So I need to enter what his usual hours would be in the month. So I'm going to say that is 100. And then also then what hours has he actually worked in the month that I'm processing here? So I'm going to say that he's actually worked 40 hours. So he's been furloughed for 400, sorry, 40 there. BrightPay now works out the reclaimable furlough pay here. And again, I just need to deal with the top up here. So in this instance, I'm just going to say that I don't want to top up. Click on apply. Okay, so his furlough pay has been added to his pay slip. But what I want to do now is pay him for the hours worked. So I'm going to just pop up to the top of his pay slip here and actually enter that he's worked the 40 hours. So I've got his hours worked and his furlough pay element on the pay slip. My next employee, Hayley, you'll see that there's furlough pay already on her pay slip. And this is an example of where I have brought across her furlough pay from the previous pay period. This is my first month of the 21-22 tax year. So this information has come across when I've done the import from 2021 BrightPay. It's important where furlough pay is carried forward that you do review the information, especially where you have employees who are flexibly being furloughed because their hours worked, etc., could have changed. And also it's important to review employees in this position when the rate will change. So when it goes down from 80% to 70% and then from 70% to 60%, because the amount will need to be adjusted here. To access this employee's furlough pay calculator, I can click this spanner symbol here and I can go into coronavirus job retention scheme, the link here, and I can just repeat the process. So using the example that she was flexibly furloughed maybe in March, that she's been fully furloughed now in April, I'm just going to type in that her regular monthly wage, £2,000 as an example, the reclaimable furlough pay is being calculated, and I'm going to say that I'm going to top that up and click on apply. So you'll see here that the adjustment has now been picked up there. Once you've completed the pay slips, you can finalise. Then when you're ready to make your claim to HMRC, BrightPay actually caters for, there's a claim report in the software just to assist you in completing your claim that you will do through the HMRC portal. That claim report is under employees and it's on the menu bar here, CJRS claim. Okay, click into that. So this first screen, you just need to enter the relevant information being asked of you. So you just need to, if you have a company registration number or a self-assessment UTR, etc., fill that information in, and then enter the start and end dates of the period you're claiming for. I'm just going to keep it simple and say it's the month of April. So I'm going to go the 1st of April to the 30th of April for my claim period. You're then just asked to set some defaults here, and these defaults can be changed when we get to a couple of screens ahead. First of all, the furlough type. So I suppose go with the majority. If you have a number of employees on furlough, are the majority fully furloughed or are they flexibly furloughed? So you can choose the option there. An original furlough start date for employees. Again, if you have a number of employees who were furloughed roughly at the same time, go with that date. I'll just go back a little bit here. This is all example data here for you. Furlough end date, if known, it may be the case that your employees still remain furloughed and you're not sure when that's going to come to an end. You can leave that blank. And how is your furlough pay determined? So I used the calculator there. So it's important then that I use the furlough pay addition option here. But furlough pay is just treated as a normal wage. So we are aware that some users of our software, they simply enter the furlough pay as a gross pay amount, that which is absolutely fine to do. It's taxable, it's nickable, it's pensionable. So if you haven't used our calculator, which there's no obligation to use, then you just need to make sure that BrightPay knows how you have entered the furlough pay so it can give you the correct figures. Once complete, I'm going to press continue. On the next screen then, BrightPay will detect which employees have earnings in the claim period that you've specified. So I have 4 employees here. I've got 3 on monthly and Christopher Rush is on my weekly payroll. So I'm going to select those and press continue. This is now your main screen and this is the screen for review. So what you just need to do for each employee is just look at the information that's there and amend appropriately. So taking Ronan, he is fully furloughed, that's absolutely fine. It could be that his furlough start date just needs to go, needs to change, and I can change that accordingly. And how can claimable furlough pay be determined? Furlough pay addition, perfect. Christopher Rush, he's on my weekly payroll. Everything fine here. If you're not sure of how a figure is being determined, you can just hover over the question mark and it will break down the amounts for you. So he's weekly and there's 4 pay periods that fell and furlough pay of £400 each in each of them there. Benedict there, he's my employee who is flexibly furloughed. So I'm going to change his furlough type to flexible. I'm then just going to enter his usual and actual hours worked here. And then everything else is correct. And Hayley, yep, I'm happy with her. And I'm going to press continue. This next screen now because BrightPay has detected that I've entered claim dates that commence on the 1st of April and end on the 3rd of April, obviously the 21-22 tax year commences from the 6th. So it could be the case, depending on your, I suppose, your payment schedules, that you could have some April furlough pay in your 2021 BrightPay, or possibly if you've moved from another software, that you need to actually get into this claim. So it could be, if you work a week in arrears, for example, on your weekly payroll, or that your monthly payroll runs from the 6th of the month to the 5th of the month. So you could have some April pay data in the 2021 tax year that obviously isn't being picked up in the 21-22 software. In this instance, this screen will allow you to manually input those extra amounts that you need to claim for, and then you can continue on. In my example today, I don't have that, so I can just carry on here. The final screen now is just a summary of your claim for you. So you just need to fill in any relevant information being asked. And then to view the report, simply click on Print, Export or Email Full Report. And you have your, I suppose, your claim report document, which will serve as your backup for when you do your HMRC claim. So it's important to print this, email it, export it, however way you want to work that, so that you have a copy to fall back on, just in case amounts are queried at any time. Okay. If you have 100 employees or more, then you are required to upload a CSV file into your HMRC portal, and we cater for that also. So you simply click on the Create CSV File button at the bottom of this screen, and that will create the file in the correct format for you, and you can upload that when you log into HMRC's portal. And that completes the claim report. So when you close out, it will just give you a little prompt just to make sure that you have exported your data, because once you close out, it will start again. And yeah, that's the end. Yeah, that's the two areas where we can assist. So I'll pass you back to Rachel.
Thanks, Vicky. So looking back at our agenda, next we're going to have a look at some of the key lessons that payroll processors have learned over the past year. If there's anything that lockdown and the requirement to work from home has taught us, it's the importance of remote access. In addition to being able to process the payroll in the office or from your business premises, you now not only want, but need to be able to access your payroll data from home. Your payroll software should easily facilitate remote working with additional user access. Just to note, BrightPay licenses can be installed on up to 10 PCs, and this means that payroll processing is possible for up to 10 users or from 10 different locations. This is very handy if you do have a number of employees working from home and they all need to access the payroll software. We have also introduced new multi-user features that work in conjunction with our optional cloud add-on, BrightPay Connect. This new functionality includes a latest version check, and then we also have an other users check when opening an employer file, and this really improves the working from home experience. Next, we have the importance of using reliable software from a reliable company. At BrightPay, we kept the payroll software up to date to cater for the relevant scheme changes, and we've really tried to automate as much as possible in the payroll software to make your life easier. In a recent survey, BrightPay achieved a 98.6% rating for our overall handling of COVID-19, and this included our customer support, our payroll upgrades, these COVID-19 webinars, and our online support. We were also delighted to win a COVID-19 Hero Award, and this is down to our response to COVID-19 and how we have helped our customers throughout the past year. Another aspect of payroll that has been very topical this year is the importance of payroll backups. Although lockdown restrictions have eased across the UK, a lot of businesses are still working remotely, and this leaves many businesses still exposed to data loss. If you only keep your payroll data on your desktop, you are at risk of losing the information. One of the main advantages of BrightPay Connect is that you can back up your payroll data instantly, allowing you to restore your payroll information should the unforeseen happen. This is simply an added layer of data protection to safeguard your payroll information. If you are not using BrightPay Connect, just make sure you are creating manual backups known as snapshots in BrightPay. It is always recommended to take a backup of your payroll to an external location, for an example, an external device, a server, or a cloud environment, rather than just your PC. This ensures that your payroll data is saved elsewhere and can be reinstated if you do suffer a PC breakdown or crash. Finally, we have the importance of automation. So whether you're an employer who processes their payroll in-house or an accountant or payroll bureau processing payroll for a number of clients, I think it's clear to say that payroll processors across the country have had an added workload this year. Not only has the added workload of processing furlough pay and making subsidy claims, but you've also had to learn about the various changes to the furlough scheme and other government incentives. It's now more important than ever to automate your payroll tasks. By eliminating time wasted on repetitive admin tasks, you do have the opportunity to counteract the time spent learning about these COVID schemes. I'll pass it over to Rachel. Thanks, Rach.
Thanks, Karen. So this brings me nicely into the final section of today's webinar, which is practical guidance on how BrightPay and BrightPay Connect can automate payroll tasks to improve the efficiency of your payroll and ultimately help your business survive the pandemic. Here at BrightPay, a lot of what we do and a lot of the features that we introduce are designed to make your life easier. Rather than talk you through each of these points, I'm going to jump into the software so that you can see how they can help your business. I know for some of you on today's webinar, you're already using BrightPay and BrightPay Connect. And if you are, feel free to go make a quick cup of tea or coffee. It should only really take a few minutes and then we'll get to the questions and answers. However, there are a couple of new features that I want to show you that are included in BrightPay 21-22. So here I am in the payroll software, and the first feature that I want to mention today is our improved multi-user functionality to reduce the risk of conflicting copies. And when you open the payroll, BrightPay will automatically check to see if there's a more up-to-date version of the employer file. In other words, where someone else in your organization worked on that employer, or maybe even you worked on the employer from a different computer. And if a more up-to-date version is available, you'll be given the option to download and use the most recent version, or you can continue using my version. BrightPay will also notify you if another person is currently in the employer file. You can be notified when the other person has finished, and it will also tell the other user that you are waiting to access the payroll. Or the second option here is to continue anyway. If you choose this option, it will notify the other user and prevent them from syncing any pending changes to BrightPay Connect. And this functionality uses both the payroll software and the BrightPay Connect add-on in tandem, so you need to be using BrightPay Connect to have this functionality. Another way that you can automate your payroll processes is by using our integration with accounting software. And this means that you can send the payroll journals directly to your general ledger from within BrightPay. We're delighted to announce our new integrations with ClearBooks, FreshBooks, and QuickFile, and this joins our growing list of integration options. Another feature that can really help with automating payroll is our new feature that gives you the ability to pay employees directly through BrightPay. Our new integration with Modular will give you a fast, secure, and easy way to pay employees through BrightPay. It eliminates the need to create bank files and the manual workload associated with making payments to employees. I'm going to close out of the payroll now, and the next feature that I want to show you is the batch payroll processing. And this feature is only really applicable to payroll bureaus and accountants processing payroll for multiple clients. You can batch finalize the payslips, check for coding notices, and send outstanding RTI and CIS submissions to HMRC for multiple clients at the same time. And this will allow you to save time on manual repetitive tasks, especially if you have a number of payrolls that don't change from week to week, or where there are a large number of single director companies on the payroll. I'm going to open BrightPay Connect now, which is a cloud add-on to the payroll software, and another tool that can be used by bureaus and accountants to automate payroll is the client payroll entry feature. With the client payroll entry, you can send a request to your clients where they can upload a CSV file of the employee's hours for a pay period through their secure online portal. The client can also add payments, addition and deduction information, notify you of any new starters, and communicate any changes with you. And once you have checked the information that was entered by the client, it will automatically synchronize to the payroll software, eliminating the manual data entry associated with running the payroll. Back on my dashboard, the second tool here is the client payroll approval feature. And it's important to note that both the payroll entry and the payroll approval can be used in tandem or as standalone. And they're also optional, where you can pick and choose which clients you want to use this feature for. With the client payroll approval, the client can approve the payroll through their secure online portal before you have even finalized the payroll. And BrightPay Connect will keep an audit trail of all interactions that happen between you and the client. There's a lot of other features in BrightPay Connect that I simply don't have time to go into too much detail on. You can use the HR documents, for example, to upload CJRS agreements and distribute them to employees. And these agreements can be stored here so that you are keeping a record of it for the required 6 years. And here you can also communicate with employees who are working from home. So there we've looked at lots of different ways to automate payroll tasks, and I'm going to finish up there with a sales plug. But if you do want to find out more, we do run online demos of both BrightPay and BrightPay Connect on a daily basis. So please let us know if you want to book onto one of the free demos. So it's now time for the questions and answers. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the questions box, and we will try to get through as many questions as possible. For our questions and answers today, we have Paul Byrne, Laura Murphy, and Victoria Clark. Vicky, I know you've been keeping an eye on the questions as they've been coming in, so I'm going to pass it over to you to manage the questions and answers.
Thanks, Rachel. Yes, we have a few questions in there that have come in during the course of the webinar there. So we'll start to take a look through them. The first question in there, are employees who are on furlough entitled to a minimum wage increase?
Morning, Vicky, I can take that one if you don't mind. I see this has come in a few times. And just go back to one of Rachel's slides earlier when you're calculating the furlough amount. In most cases, we're using the pay reference period before March 19th of March last year or 30th of October, and that hasn't changed. That's still in place. So yes, there will be situations where somebody's furlough calculation is based on old minimum wage rates rather than the new ones, and that's okay. That's fine in this situation. However, just to say, if that person was working flexible furlough, any period where they're actually working should be paid at the new minimum wage rate, and any training that they're undertaking should be at the new minimum wage rate as well.
Great, thanks, Dora. And I think you probably just answered this question just a little bit further down that's come in. Should the furlough pay be calculated using new national minimum wage rates? So yeah. we'll take that one. Just one in there. I don't know, Paul, if you want to take, because I know you've been looking at this one, but it's just regarding a shop staff member there. And you've been given some data. It's a long one, but yeah, if you want to just summarise it.
With a lot of detail in it, so I don't think we'd be able to follow the train of thought if I read everything out on it. Good morning, everybody, by the way. I think one of the great things about the end of lockdown is that we can look forward to not having to work out these furlough calculations when we're all back to work. It is not intuitive by any means, and it can cause quite an amount of confusion. Like I'm a qualified accountant and I was always good at maths, but I must say I always get confused when I'm looking at the furlough calculations. So if you are getting confused yourself, you're not alone. And this particular one, the question really was in relation to overtime hours and whether that should be counted as part of the furlough or as part of the paid hours. And really what it comes down to is looking at the fundamentals. Contracted hours it was mentioned in this particular question, and really they don't count as the usual hours when you're calculating flexible furlough. It's the usual hours for the reference period that you have to look at. And if hours are paid, be it overtime or otherwise, it's hours paid that gets deducted from the usual hours to work out the furlough hours. So really that's, in this case, you do pay the overtime hours, you don't count as part of furlough, and you pay the overtime at whatever the contracted rate is. So there were a lot of variations and questions in that particular question, and really what it comes down to at the end of the day is no, it's usual hours for the reference period. Take away from that whatever the paid hours, be them overtime or not, and that gives you your furlough hours for your furlough calculation. And correct me if I'm wrong there, Vicky, please, because as I say, I do get confused with these.
No, well said. Yeah, well described. Thanks very much. Is the COVID-19 SSP 14-day rebate still valid? I can take that one. It is indeed. Don't really hear too much about it, actually. We don't get too many questions on it anymore. But yes, and I was only looking at the guidance yesterday. There doesn't seem to be any end dates mentioned yet either for it. So, so yeah, it is valid. One for Laura, maybe. I have an employee returning from maternity leave and she will be flexibly furloughed. What average hours do I use?
Yeah, Vicky, I can come in, but feel free to add anything. So anybody returning from maternity leave, we have had guidance to say that their furlough calculation will be based on their pre-maternity hours. So you'll be looking at their hours before they went on maternity leave. So they won't be at any disadvantage for having taken the maternity leave.
Yeah, thanks very much. Is there a limit as to how many employees the company can furlough?
I can take that one, Vicky. I suppose in the original CJRS 1 and 2, I think there were actually limits based on whatever previous claims were made. But in CJRS 3 and any future iteration, it's really, there's no limit. It's all based on, you know, whether somebody was working and whether an RTI had been submitted in relation to them by a particular date, be it the 2nd of March or 1st November, whatever the dates were. But there's no actual limit.
Okay, thanks very much. A company director, can they be furloughed?
Yes, absolutely. Company directors are basically treated like any other employee. I suppose there are some nuances, obviously, with company directors, and that's a lot of times they're paid annually. And, you know, to operate the furlough correctly for them, they really need to be changed to a monthly or a weekly pay frequency. But there are various examples in the HMRC website in relation to company directors and how to work out the furlough for them. But no, they can be furloughed, basically, is the answer to that question.
Great, thank you very much. If an employee chooses to reduce their hours or their role in the business and were originally on full but now part-time furlough, does their original furlough hours still stand, or can we take them off the scheme?
Okay, there's two questions there, and I might actually ask Laura to help you with the second part of that. But yes, the original furlough hours still stand. You know that there are winners and losers in the furlough calculations in relation to usual hours, and in this case, this particular person, as I say, would be a winner. in that they'd still be getting paid furlough in relation to their reference hours, the usual hours based on the reference period. So yeah, the first part of that is the original furlough hours still stand, or can we take them off the scheme? Well, I suppose it's always at the employer's discretion, Laura, I suppose, whether they continue to furlough somebody.
Absolutely. If you want to remove them from the scheme and you're happy and you're in a position to pay their part-time hours at whatever the agreed rate is, yeah, there's no legislation to say you couldn't do that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Our holiday year is based on the calendar year. Sorry. Our holiday year is based on the calendar year. Fully furloughed employees earned a full year's holidays in 2020. Is there any cut-off by which they must take their 2020 holiday entitlement or lose them? You aware of your Laura?
Yeah, I'll come in there again, Vicky. Yeah, so they've correctly said here, you employees continue to accrue their annual leave during furlough. We did get a change to one of the few changes to employment legislation last year, which extended or allowed people to carry over their annual leave where they weren't able to take it because of COVID and the situation. So employees are allowed to carry over their annual leave for 2 years. So for yourself, then, if it's a calendar basis, you're looking at December 22. However, further on in that piece of guidance by HMRC, it does say that it's unlikely that fully furloughed people would need to. There are situations where they will, of course, need to carry over their leave. But I think the kind of thought is that employers and employees will agree to use some of their annual leave whilst on furlough. So that would certainly be an aim over the next 2 years to promote that they take their annual leave. But to answer the question, I suppose, being asked, yes, they can carry it over until 2022.
Great, thanks, Laura. I have a working agreement that staff signed back in April 2020. Do I need to update this to take into consideration the variance of flexible furlough?
Yes, I'll come in again. Absolutely, you do need to. And I think HMRC are being a little bit strict on this, where they do want to see full records of people going on flexible furlough, and they particularly want to see a record of the hours that are worked. So again, just so there's any, in case or should there be misuse of the scheme, they know exactly what hours are being claimed through furlough and what hours are flexible furlough. So absolutely, I'd have an updated agreement in place there.
Thank you. Has there been any clarification on how the employment allowance should be adjusted for last tax year if employer NIC was originally claimed under the CJRS scheme, but at the end of the tax year, the employer NIC wasn't above the £4,000? HMRC, as you know, credited all the employer NIC when the employment allowance was claimed, even though some of it was reclaimed under the CJRS scheme. I've been unable to get an answer from HMRC.
I don't know, Vicky, about you, but I haven't heard of any update on that particular issue.
I've heard nothing, unfortunately. No, I think they do. Sometimes these queries don't come our way because they're HMRC related, so they don't always come to us. But I've heard nothing, unfortunately, to be able to provide anything there.
Part of the problem is trying to get a hold of HMRC as well, because the new working arrangements aren't conducive to them answering the phones, unfortunately.
Yeah. Do we pay bank holidays in full and claim 8% grant?
Yeah, I'll come in there, Vicky. Yes, if you are paying bank holidays now, under Working Time Act, holidays must be paid at full pay, so you can claim the 80% through the grant and just top up then yourself and pay that extra.
Thank you. If an employee is back working full-time and takes 3 days off as holiday, can this holiday be claimed as furlough?
I'm not sure that would be in the spirit of the scheme. Certainly the guidance does say that furlough can't be used for short periods of leave, so I'm not sure if that's something that HMRC would look to favourably on.
Exactly. Just have another question. It's just a repeat with no harm, just to Reiterate, due to the increase in the minimum living wage, is furlough worked out based on the new rate or the old rate? So just as we covered there at the start of the questions there, it would be on the, I suppose in all these cases, you identify the employee's reference date and then work out then based on whether they're fixed or variable hours. So it would be on the old pay rather than the new rate there.
This is actually hours worked, in which case they're obviously paid at the new rate.
Yeah. Employer eligibility. Employers have to declare that they have been adversely impacted by the pandemic in order to claim furlough. This could mean impacting a lot or a little. Is there any threshold to define impacted? Do employees have to demonstrate how they have been impacted and to what degree in terms of income? One for you, Paul, there maybe?
Yeah, like I haven't come across anything which asks somebody to prove the impact on the business. I know in Ireland they do actually have a requirement to keep records of you know, turnover or revenue versus the equivalent period pre-pandemic, and you know, there has to be, you know, 30% or 25% reduction or whatever. But in the UK situation, I'm not aware of any such stipulation.
No, I haven't seen anything either, to be honest. That's not to say it's not there, but I haven't come across anything. I've mentioned it just during the Bright Pay demo, but I've not been using the furlough pay. I suppose the specific addition in the additions and deductions section. That's absolutely fine. There's no obligation to use that. It's there for assistance. But if you've been entering it as a gross pay amount, that's absolutely fine, you know, as long as you then just choose the right option when you're doing the claim report in Bright Pay, and it can work it out correctly for you. You mentioned that it is at the employer's discretion to permit a fully furloughed employee to take his or her holidays during the furlough period. How can an employer object if the employee is not required to attend their workplace?
Yeah, so I did say, and I said earlier on as well, that it's certainly something that is promoted, that employers and employees would agree that some, if not all, of annual leave is taken while an employee is on furlough, but discretion is always with the employer in terms of agreeing annual leave and approving annual leave. And there may be cases where an employer cannot approve annual leave for somebody who's on furlough leave. And I suppose the main one that comes to mind is the fact that if you have an employee on furlough leave and they're taking annual leave, you need to pay their pay at 100% of pay. So if you're in a position where you're paying the 80%, you know, and as a result of COVID and cash flow issues, you may not actually have the financial means to top that up. So that would be the kind of main reason I would think that somebody may not be able to approve annual leave.
Thanks, Laura. I have an employee who's on maternity leave until the 15th of April 2021. We want to put her on furlough. How do we work the first month out, and how can I do this in a report to get an accurate figure? I suppose there's a few things to consider here. I mean, your starting point will be to determine what the employee's reference date is, and then work according to that. So once you've established what their reference date is, you then need to say, well, are they on fixed hours or are they on variable hours? And then that will then ascertain, I suppose, the calculations that you need to follow, the rules you need to follow in ascertaining what the usual hours are for the furlough calculation. So I suppose it's hard to answer this question without having the information. But say they're on a fixed hours, then you know it is possible to then run a report in Bright Pay, for example, just to ascertain that figure. So a little bit harder with variable hours sometimes, and it all depends on whether you were using Bright Pay before. You have to remember sometimes that if the reference period is the 19th of March 2020, you're looking at the 1920 tax year as well. So you know, we're in 21-22, so you're kind of going back a couple of years to get the information that you need. If an employee started on the 1st of January 2021 and works irregular hours, do you use the salary paid in February or the average of January and February as the reference pay? So for this one, So if she has a start date of the 1st of January, she has a reference date of the 2nd of March. And if she's paid irregular hours, she's under the, I suppose, the heading of variable. And so what you would need to do here is you base it on the average number of hours worked from her first date, from her start date basically, up to the day before the employee's first day spent on furlough. Okay, so I hope that answers that one. Multi-user functionality causes confusion if the BrightPay data file is stored on a server where all users access the same file. You add anything to that, Paul?
That's a fair point. I suppose it's something that we probably need to improve our messaging, particularly in those pop-ups that come up. You know, that we can actually detect whether it's the same computer or IP address, so that maybe we change the messaging. You know, if it is the same computer that's, you know, that the file has been opened from. But I'll take that away anyway and talk to developers about it.
Okay. Look, will BrightPay Connect have a facility to allow me to set up an employee to authorize holiday, or can only an administrator do this? I have an employee who controls the work diary at the moment.
I'll take that, Vicky, but please feel free again to correct me. You can set up users on Connect, so you can give an employee access to approve annual leave, so that you can select it so that they don't have payroll access or access to any documents. I think they see the employee's name and address, and then they can approve. They get the annual leave requests, but they don't see any more than that as a user.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose that's particularly important for say bureaus or accountants that obviously don't want to be inundated with holiday requests from employees of their clients. They'd set up a user as one of the client themselves to approve those holiday requests instead.
Thanks, Paul. Sorry, I'm just looking through to see if there's anything different coming in. Is it a legal requirement to have agreement for employees on flexible furlough, or is it just better to have it?
No, it's a requirement to have it. I would definitely have it. There's no requirement for the employee to sign it back, but you should be giving it to the employee and yeah, have it in writing with the employee. And sorry, Vicky, I can't see the question now, but I saw it there 2 seconds ago. It's related to that question. Sorry, somebody on flexible furlough with 2 employees and they work full-time hours, a couple of days here and there. They are happy with this, but we don't have written agreements each time they work. I would be putting something, it doesn't have to be anything complicated, a big agreement, but even if it's some document where you have a record of the hours that they work. And again, HMRC have requested people keep this for 6 years. So it's just in case it was ever audited down the line that you have a record of the hours that they worked.
I know Connect could be quite useful for rolling out those sort of documents to the employees as well.
Yeah.
Particularly when you can actually see whether the employee is opened it or not in the Connect logs.
Absolutely. With all of this, it just comes down to communication and having your track. Yeah, and Connect can take that pain.
Thank you. Is there a way for the CJRS claim report in BrightPay for a 4-weekly period to be in line with HMRC's calculation? It seems that there's always a difference, and it may be due to the pay date being a week after the period end date. There can be a slight difference actually sometimes, and it's just down to, I suppose, HMRC's calculator, I suppose, is done sometimes quite manually, so it's kind of designed sometimes that if you got your calculator out that you know you can do the figures yourself. With our software calculations, we are often to, I suppose, more decimal places, and then sometimes you can find that it's a few pence difference when you do the same calculation in HMRC. So that might explain that. I'm not sure. If it's really different, maybe if you want to contact our support team, we can advise that. But it shouldn't really be too much different there. It's usually down to the rounding that's going on. can an inability to pay be an acceptable reason to deny an employee taking their holidays, given that he or she continues to accrue a minimum of 1.67 days per month, separate from the bank holidays?
Yeah, this is a follow-up to the previous question. Yes, an inability to pay is an acceptable reason at the moment, and you're not fully denying them. You're just denying an employee taking their leave at this time. They still continue to accrue their leave, and it's just that you'll allow them to take it at another date down the line, and the legislation in terms of carrying over that leave still applies. So you're just denying it at a particular time.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Probably just got time for one more question here. Can you only upload a CSV for claims if there are over 100 staff?
Yes, that's the only way you can actually do the CSV. Unfortunately, I don't think HMRC ever developed a system to automatically process those CSV files. If they had done so, I'm sure they would have reduced that minimum number. But as I understand it, they're actually getting those CSV files and having to process them more or less manually. So unfortunately, that limit is still there.
Great, thanks, Paul. So I'm just conscious of time, so I think we'll probably just need to stop the questions there. I know there's a few more that have come into us and a few suggestions for BrightPay as well, which we can flag our site. That's no problem at all. But I'll pass you back to Rachel.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vicky, for managing the questions there, and Paul and Laura as well. So thanks to everyone for joining us for today's webinar. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, we will send out a follow-up email with a link to the recording of the webinar and a link to the slides as well. So thanks for joining us, and we hope you found the webinar useful. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.